Hey there, folks. Welcome to another video in the Game of Thrones series. Today, we're going to talk about one of the most controversial and scandalous characters in the entire series, Aegon IV Targaryen, the Unworthy. If you thought the characters in Game of Thrones were complicated enough, get ready to meet a king who took the chaos to another level. Aegon IV was a true master at creating confusion, intrigues, and scandals, and his love life was so complex that even Jon Snow would get lost trying to count how many children he had. But beyond his love stories, Aegon IV's reign was marked by betrayals and civil wars that had a lasting impact on the future of Westeros. And that's why today, we're going to talk about his skills, powers, and how he became such an important character in the history of Game of Thrones. So, if you're ready to dive into another episode of this epic saga, get ready to meet a king who was so unworthy that even the Lannisters would look at him and say, "Wow, what a clueless guy." Let's go. History and bibliography. Are you ready to dive deep into the history of Aegon IV Targaryen? Then sit down, grab a glass of wine, and let's get started. Aegon IV was born in 135 AC, son of King Viserys II Targaryen. From a young age, he showed signs that he wouldn't be one of the most peaceful and balanced characters in the series. They say he had a thing for dangerous pranks, like jumping from dangerous heights and making risky bets. Did I mention he was kind of clueless? But despite his reckless behavior, Aegon IV became king of Westeros at 27. And, well, his reign wasn't exactly a golden era for the kingdom. Instead, it was marked by scandals, intrigues, and betrayals. One of the most famous stories about Aegon IV is that of the Blackfyre sword. Legend has it that the king gave the sword to his bastard son, Daemon Blackfyre, instead of leaving it to his legitimate son, Daeron II Targaryen. This sparked a rebellion known as the Blackfyre Rebellion, which lasted almost 30 years. And, well, things only got worse from there. Aegon IV had several mistresses over the years, including his own sisters. And that's just the beginning of his love craziness. He is the biological father of 9 bastard children, known as Aegon IV's Great Bastards. They played an important role in the history of Westeros, and many of them became important characters in the series. But despite all his flaws and scandals, Aegon IV was not a weak or incompetent king. In fact, he was a cunning and ambitious strategist. He was known for his ability to manipulate people and create alliances. However, his actions were also motivated by his greed and desire for power. In addition, Aegon IV had a striking characteristic. He was a very tall and strong man, which earned him the nickname Aegon the Tall. And he used that strength to intimidate and subjugate his opponents. But, as we mentioned before, Aegon IV was also a man without limits. He became so obsessed with power that he ended up becoming a tyrannical and inhumane king. And his actions had lasting consequences for the future of Westeros. Anyway, the story of Aegon IV is a mixture of tragedy, madness, and love scandals. He was a controversial and complex character in the history of Westeros, and his actions had a lasting impact on the future of the Seven Kingdoms. Powers and abilities. Now it's time to talk about the powers and abilities of Aegon IV Targaryen. Well, it may be a bit difficult to find something positive to say about this guy, but let's try. One of the things that made Aegon IV a strong leader was his ability to manipulate people. He was a master at creating alliances and pitting people against each other. He knew how to use his imposing presence and sharp rhetoric to convince people to follow him. But of course, this ability was also used for less noble purposes. Aegon IV used his ability to manipulate people to benefit himself, often at the expense of others. He didn't care who he stepped on to get to the top. In addition, Aegon IV was a skilled warrior. He was known for his physical strength and swordsmanship. And he wasn't afraid to engage in direct combat. On many occasions, he led Targaryen forces in battle. However, Aegon IV's physical strength was also accompanied by his lack of control. He often acted impulsively, without thinking about the consequences of his actions. This made him a fierce fighter, but also put him in dangerous situations. Another ability that Aegon IV possessed was the ability to control dragons. As a Targaryen, he had a strong bond with these mythical creatures. And on one occasion, he used this connection to fly atop Balerion the Black Dread, the largest dragon in Westeros at the time. Aegon IV was the only Targaryen to be able to ride Balerion, which shows his skill and confidence. But again, this ability was also used for less noble purposes. Aegon IV had no qualms about using dragons as weapons of mass destruction. He was responsible for several deaths and destructions in his dragon attacks. Finally, it is important to mention that Aegon IV also had great ambition. He wanted to become the most powerful king of all time, and was willing to do anything to achieve that goal. This made him a determined and ruthless leader, but also made him dangerous and unpredictable. In summary, Aegon IV's abilities included his ability to manipulate people, his physical strength and fighting ability, his connection with dragons, and his great ambition. But unfortunately, these abilities were often used for selfish and destructive purposes. Conclusion. Well, we've come to the end of this video about Aegon IV Targaryen and his stories, bibliography, powers, and abilities. I hope you have learned a lot about this controversial and intriguing character. Despite all his flaws and questionable actions, Aegon IV was still a powerful and influential leader in his time. He left a lasting legacy in the history of Westeros and is remembered to this day for his actions and consequences. But of course, it is important to remember that not all leaders are perfect and that they have their own faults and flaws. The important thing is to learn from history and always strive to become better people and leaders. And with that, I want to conclude this video with an invitation for you to subscribe to my YouTube channel and not miss any of the next videos. Here you will find more fun and informative content about Game of Thrones and other interesting topics. So, don't waste any more time and subscribe right now. And remember, history is always changing and evolving, and it is up to us to learn from it and shape our future. Until next time.
If you liked the content, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. I'll stay here until next time.